Allies or Enemies by Peachiibunnii, Chapter 12. Scar was giddy as he made his coffee this morning. He made his coffee just like he had the day prior, but today he got to pull out a second mug, 2 sugars, and a little bit of cream. He mixed the coffee well and moved to sit at the break table in the lounge area. He sat near Ansi in his seat over the news. Grian had texted him he was feeling much better and would be coming back to work. Never had Scar been so happy to make a second mug of coffee. When the door opened, Scar couldn't help but smile wider. He couldn't remember a time he smiled so wide. There he was, messy but tame blonde hair, more clean than usual. His red sweater and white collar poked out from underneath it. A handful of disorganized and bent papers. His glasses slightly askew and tucked under his hair. The blonde turned to Scar, and his whole demeanor changed. He smiled widely and rushed over to set his things down, sitting just as excitedly as Scar sat. He definitely wasn't vibrating in his seat or jumping up and down like Scar was, but he was smiling. The sheer thrill of seeing Grian had Scar overjoyed, but to see the blonde so happy himself sent a light blush across his face. He wanted to lean in and just kiss his dopey smile. "You're back!" Scar announced between the both of them, laughing excitedly to break the silence. Grian grinned back, equally as happy. "I am!" he cheered and laughed with the brunette, leaning back casually in his chair. He sighed and took the mug Scar used for his coffee and smiled. He took a sip, his smile unwavering. "I've missed this place, if I'm being honest." Scar was honestly hoping the other would say he missed him, but just having Grian back was more than enough for him. "I missed you," Scar blurted out. "I never realized how much I would miss you before you left," Scar admitted. He missed the blonde's groans and complaints during the day. He missed the messy papers that annoyed Scar so much. He missed listening to Grian mumble under his breath and rub his face endlessly and whine about needing sleep. The other looked healthy, though, after his break. Very healthy. "I missed you too, if I'm honest," Grian admitted. Scar let that go to his head and felt his heart go all funny. The bags under Grian's eyes had long since faded, and his hair looked cleaned and perfect, minus a bit of wavy mess. He was smiling. Scar just couldn't get over the fact he was smiling. Scar could just feel the difference. I don't remember much of my time off, if I'm being honest. The first day or two was just spent relaxing, and the next thing I know, I was just terribly sick. Pearl thinks it was my body finally getting the relaxation it craved, and my health caved. I mean, I slept for like 3 days straight, Grin mumbled around his coffee. "I'm so glad Pearl was with me," he smiled, missing the taste of Scar's coffee. Scar remembered her telling him that. "Oh, what? I mean, that's good, because you look great," Scar grinned, gesturing. "It sucks you had time off and got sick, though. I wish you could have spent it with your sister." Scar frowned for Grian. Grian merely shrugged it off, though, wincing a little. He lowered his left shoulder and rolled it a little. He took note of Scar's worried expression and waved his hand. "Slept wrong for a couple of nights. Still stiff and sore," he explained, rubbing his shoulder again. "Anyway, I didn't mind being sick. I mean, clearly it was somewhat worth it. Pearl was there to take care of me for the most part. I remember waking up to her just being there. I don't remember much. I feel like I lost a week of my life." Grin laughed, full teeth and all showing. Scar loved it. How happy he was, how loud he was, how much room he was taking up, and how comfortable Grin felt to be this energetic with Scar. Scar never once saw the other so happy and lively. Scar loved him. "You look so happy," Scar suddenly took note, causing the blonde smile to fade. Scar immediately regretted his choice of words. He frowned, about to correct his mistake, when Grin smiled widely again, his face a light pink. "I am happy," Grian admitted slowly, as if he didn't even register his own happiness. He looked at Scar across the table and tampered with the mouth of the mug, running his fingers over it. "I didn't realize how much resting could improve my mood. I really needed that sleep and rest. I feel bad, and I'm a little behind my work, but it's really worth it if I'm honest." The blonde continued. staring into his coffee longing. Scar knew that look as Grin's overthinking face. Why the sad face, then? Scar asked, calling him right out. It made the blonde look up and laugh gently. I'm serious. The first time I see you so happy and you start overthinking. That simply won't do, Scott countered, leaning across the table to prop his elbow up, setting his chin in his hand. Tell me your troubles, he grinned. Grin couldn't help but laugh again, leaning back to full-on snort. It was the cutest thing Scott had ever heard from the blonde. Grin quietened back down from his fit of giggles. All right, don't judge me. Don't judge me? Grin asked the brunette, not wanting him to judge him. Now Scar was intrigued, setting his head back up. I would never, Scar smiled, holding up a hand. Scout's on her. Grin lifted his head like a bird. You're a scout? He asked, like it was a foreign concept. Absolutely not, Scar smiled, watching the blonde tilt his head back and laugh again. He loved hearing the blonde laugh. It was his new favorite sound. No, his snort was. All right, liar, Grin smiled. He began, glancing away with a shy smile before looking back at Scar. I kind of wish I was more organized. Like, my desk is a mess, and I wish I had better storage and organization. Now that I'm back and feel better, it's kind of stressing me out. Scar's face lit up with excitement. This is perfect, he grinned, moved to stand with his cane. Going to a locker in the corner of the room, he unlocked it with a key and crouched to dig around for something in the bottom. Green craned his neck to try and look behind Scar's shoulders, leaning from side to side. Scar moved to stand up with a small groan, leading Green to lean back and drink his coffee again. It is? He asked, taking another sip of his coffee. He came back to the table with 3 binders, different colours of course. He set them down, the edges being lined with a shiny sort of foil that caught Green's interest more than the binders themselves. I bought these for you one day when you'd eventually let me help you organize your space. Green's jaw dropped a little. So the binders are for homework stuff. So one is for papers that need to be graded, one is for the ones you have graded, and the third is for your plans and notes to yourself. Personally, I have a chart of kids I can't sit next to each other because they'll fight or get along too well. I think it's something you should consider. Oh, and you you pre-planned this? Green finally asked, his mouth still agape. Scar looked up from the binders to meet Green's eyes. His eyes flickered to his mouth to spot his 2 front teeth poking at his bottom lip. Scar forced himself to tear his eyes away, meeting Green's eyes again. The blonde had closed his mouth, eyes wide as they stared at each other. Scar swallowed, quickly continuing before Green spoke on the action he definitely picked up on. Yeah, I mean, I always see you carrying around your papers and nothing, and thought, you should put them in something, he mumbled, words articulated perfectly as he stared at Green. Oh, the blonde mumbled, setting his cup down. He chewed on his bottom lip as he gently reached out to take them, brushing his fingers gently over Scar's as he did so. Scar glanced down, making a note that his hands were rather high on the binders, and there wasn't any reason for Green to reach so far up. Yet he did. That detail did not go unmissed by Scar. Thank you, the blonde spoke, realizing he hadn't said anything. The blonde pulled them closer to sit in his lap, fingers playing with the shiny rim that caught his eye from before. Scar watched him, his face definitely heating up. He thought for a while he made the blonde uncomfortable, but was it possible? Scar began, the blonde snapping his head up to meet his eyes again. I'm glad you're feeling better, he decided to land on, mentally slapping himself in the face. Green smiled though, seemingly back to normal after the tension lessened. Me too, I enjoyed the rest, but I missed the work. Would you care for maybe grading papers later? Green smiled softly. Scar froze. Is that a date? What? Green asked, his face clearly heating up. Scar's heart stopped, He realized he asked out loud. He began, "Is that a date?" He repeated, not even knowing what was coming out of his mouth. He hadn't seen the blonde in nearly a week and was suddenly flirting with the other. It was insanity. "I can stop by your place," Green immediately replied. "Tonight?" Green whispered, seemingly unsure of his words. Insanity that worked! Scar had a moment of bliss wash over him, more than thrilled to have one-on-one time with the other. It became impossible for him to wipe the massive smile off his face. "I'll text you my address," Scott stated slowly. Grin smiled back, moving to stand up with his blinders. "I'll reply?" "I'll reply," the blonde stated, immediately scrunching his eyes shut and frowning deeply. Scott couldn't help but admire the look. The blonde sighed and shook his head, clearly embarrassed. "I'm gonna go and organize." "Thank you again," he mumbled, moving gently before picking up his coffee mug. As he walked awkwardly to the door, he bumped into it before finally ducking out of the room. Scott sat in disbelief for a moment before punching his fist in the air, silently cheering for himself. How he managed to score the date with the implication of a date with Gurian, of all people, amazed him. He truly outdid himself. With a wide smile and slight bounce in his step, regardless of his cane, he made his way to his own classroom. A few early students already there with notes and work they were doing. Tommy, of course, was hyper-aware of Scar's too big smile he was sporting. "Mr. Scar!" Tommy beamed, catching his teacher's attention. His smile didn't waver. In fact, his whole mood didn't even waver. "You're way too happy. Is it maybe because a certain teacher came back today?" The blonde grinned, watching Scar have zero reaction. The teacher grinned, moving to sit at his chair, placing his chin in his hand. "Almost. More like because a certain teacher agreed to go on a date, of all things, with your teacher." Scar pointed to himself and watched his kids have a mini riot, applauding and screaming in excitement before he had hushed them. "That's right, it only took me 3 years, but I got it!" Scar grinned, unable to contain his excitement or the happy news. He wasn't even aware of the fact he was in love for 3 years, but saying it out loud made such a perfect sense. He was always fond of the blonde because he loved the other. If he knew it would have been this easy, he would have gotten Green binders to organize papers literally years ago. He may not have known until recently, but the sentiment would have been nice. "Where are you going?" Tommy's best friend Tubbo spoke up, just as excited as Tommy for the teacher. Scar faltered. "That's confidential," he said quickly, glancing at the two. If he said it was grading papers, he knew it likely wouldn't count as a date in his kid's eyes. If he said his apartment, though, then it would have taken a turn into an innuendo he didn't want to try and explain. "Come on," Tommy frowned. "It's been 3 years of seeing you and him dancing around each other. You can't just drop all of this on us and leave at the best parts," Tommy whined. Apparently, even his students saw it before he did. Pushing the embarrassing thought away, Scar laughed softly, knowing his student was right. He loved toying with them. "I can't say much, though. I don't even know if it'll go well, but all hopes it does." "Tonight," Scar whispered, crossing his fingers. "Tonight?" another student in the back announced. Scar waved them off. "All right, enough. You need to learn. Don't let me forget your final exam is still coming up. Now, I've got some practice tests for you all. I want you to use your notes to finalize answers. You shouldn't be working with partners or looking things up. Once you take the practice test, we'll go over everything in class and use the correct answers as a study guide to use on the real exam. Does that make sense?" he asked, making sure his students understood his instructions before sending them off to work. He sat comfortably behind his desk, checking emails and going over the few he missed yesterday to make sure he didn't miss anything important. A few updates consisted of green classes being shifted around and changed, a handful of students mingling into Scar's class. Since they taught a similar subject, nearly all the students had both their classes. Scar briefly wondered if he talked about his silly crushes and gossip with his own. Then he wondered how long Grian had liked Scar. Maybe if he knew before Scar did. Hearing the thought didn't get Scar far though. For one, he didn't know if Grian liked him as much as Scar had come to realize his own feelings. 2. The emails he found were less appealing than he would have liked them to be. Multiple about top secret meetings and his personal request for a meeting with the governor and a couple of other officials. Scar scrolled to find a date for a good time and luckily found it a few days away. He was safe tonight at the very least. As much as being a hero meant to him, he still hoped nothing would come between him and Grian. He realized how selfish it seemed to think. He realized how selfish it seemed to think like that, but in his mind it was at least somewhat understandable. He tried to rationalize the time in his mind, prioritizing Grian over being a superhero. He frowned at the thought of their relationship continuing and having to hide his identity, even from Grian. As soon as the anxiety and guilt began clouding his thoughts, a simple text pulled him out of his thoughts. Grian, 8:23 a.m. I just realized I most definitely want to change before going over, so please don't be offended if I'm late. Scar smiled, pulling himself away from the stressful thoughts and emails. It was so easy for the blonde to relieve his stress. Scar, 8:24 a.m. I suppose for you I can make an exception. Scar, 8:24 a.m. Jelly may not be as kind. Grian, 8:25 a.m. Oh, dearie me. Scar smiled at the goofiness of the situation. He loved seeing how playful the other could be sometimes. He was glad he got to experience the other's goofy side more and more as their friendship progressed. Grian, 8:25 a.m. Please, on my behalf, persuade her to not stay too mad. Scar, 8:27 a.m. Attempts will be made, but no promises will be kept. Grian, 8:27 a.m. No! Grian, 8:28 a.m. Okay, I see how it is. Get back to class and don't forget to dox yourself to me, heart. Scar stayed at the heart a little longer than was probably normal. He sent his address shortly after, though, grinning in victory. Not his proudest moment to leave the conversation at that, but work had to be done at the very least. He had to email officials back and plan a meeting. He had to filter his classes in and out. He had to take a break for lunch, pouting when Grian said he had to catch up on work and couldn't come to eat together. Scar quickly reminded himself the other would be spending hours with him later and refused to be upset. He only really noticed the end of the day when Grian walked past his door and backtracked to step inside. You're still here? Grian asked, pulling the other from his thoughts. Scar jumped and squealed, making Grian laugh. Scar glanced over to see Grian, holding one of the binders. Scar couldn't help the smile spreading across his face. I'm heading home to drop a couple things off and also get a couple of things. Don't stay too long. I don't want to stand outside your door awkwardly waiting on you, Grian teased, the awkward tension of planning said date gone from any corner of either of their minds. Scar nodded, looking back to his screen. Fret not, little one, for I am leaving soon, he promised the other, shutting his computer off after his sentence. He gathered a handful of his documents and put them in his shoulder bag before standing up. Grian was gone from the doorway, but Scar knew he'd see the other in less than an hour. He made his way into the hall and saw Grian turning the corner to an exit and smiled to himself. He followed shortly after, separating from his friend's route to head to his own home. He needed to tidy up, his kitchen at the very least. His living room he figured was fine, but at least he didn't have to tidy his bedroom. The thought alone made heat rise to his face. He walked his walk home was quiet. It was still early in the afternoon, sort of later in the day, but the sun was still overhead. Maybe setting in 4 or so hours. He smiled during his walk, thinking about how the papers and plans would go. Somehow he never had Grin over. He had multiple people over, a lot actually. Tango, Cub, Cleo, Joel, Etho, and his fiance B-Dubs. Somehow, over the years, he never invited Grian over though. He was going to put an end to that today though. He happily took the elevator to his apartment floor, unlocking his door to reveal a very excited Jelly. She sat on the kitchen counter closest to the door, leaning in towards him. Well, good afternoon to you too, he beamed, closing the door before he reached out to happily pet her. He rubbed her face and pet down her back before gently picking her up to set her down on the ground. He should probably break her habit of climbing onto the counters, but it was too cute. And she didn't do any real harm anyway. He always put dangerous things away, never leaving food or sharp utensils out. He did need to empty the dishwasher and load the dirty bowls and cups in after the clean ones were taken out, though. He did that first, just to tidy up the sink. Flipping the magnet, he then moved to the living room, taking a quick glance around. Jelly's toys and fur were everywhere, but that was unavoidable with her loving and playful nature. Scott didn't do anything to change that, though. He embraced her personality and excitement wholeheartedly. He looked down and felt her rubbing up against his leg, weaving between them. He looked down and felt her rubbing against his legs, weaving between them. Scar smiled and bent down to pet her, watching as she moved to lay on her side to attack his shoelaces and untie them. He laughed, untying the others as she chewed on the other. You must want me to take these off, he joked as he stood back up to slide them off, watching her become interested in the shoe itself. She wrapped her body around it to kick and bite at it, attacking her prey viciously. Scott took a picture. He stared at it before getting a text, reminding him of his real mission. Dang it, Jelly, being so cute and distracting him during his mission to clean up. He supposed he'd forgive her, though, only because she was so cute. Grin, 4:38 p.m. Heading out now. Give my apologies to Jelly before I come over. Scar, 4:39 p.m. Image sent. Scar, 4:39 p.m. She says you're next. Grin, 4:41 p.m. Shocked face. Grin, 4:41 p.m. I beg for my innocence. Scar, 4:42 p.m. She seems to be in a forgiving mood, only if you show up before 5 though. Grin, 4:42 p.m. BRB, I'm running. Scar laughed out loud at that, pulling his phone away to look at Jelly, who stopped attacking his shoes, but was instead chewing on the shoelace and tearing it up. It was already tattered from her playing and biting at them anyway, so it wasn't like it was something to stop her. He set his phone on the table, watching Jelly as he thought everything he needed to do before Grian did come over. Scar mentally remembered to check his bedroom closet was hidden, shuffled out of the living room and down the hall to check, poking his head inside his room. He was pretty good about keeping the closet and his equipment hidden, but now would be the worst time for someone to find out, and he wasn't ready to tell anyone, even if Grian would probably be the first to know. He glanced around and casually started picking up dirty clothes and small items, though, making his bed, adjusting his wheelchair next to his bed, straightening his lampshade, smoothing out the wrinkles on the bedsheets. He knew he was being antsy, getting nervous. The other would think he was messy, but he's seen Grian's desk. Grian is the last person to care about the mess. Just as the bond came to mind, he heard his phone go off in the living room. He paced back to the coffee table and picked it up to see Grian message him. Grian, 4:57 p.m. Made it. Scott perked up and set his phone back down, quickly going to the front door. Jelly was already on the counter waiting for him. He opened the door excitedly and found Grian on his phone, slightly out of breath. He was wearing sweatpants and a jacket over. Scott glanced down briefly, only what was acceptable enough to take a quick look, but it was easy. It was easily still the hottest thing he'd ever seen Grian wear. A sleeveless shirt that covered his stomach, but just barely touched the hem of his sweatpants. Why are you so out of breath? Scar asked, opening the door wider for the other. Grian heaved as he stepped inside, sighing softly. Because I ran. I told you I was running, he replied, turning around to look at Scar. Scar easily burst into a fit of laughter, making the blonde smile. Grian rolled his eyes and set his hand on the counter to support himself as he slipped his shoes off. He looked up to be met with Jelly rubbing his fingers. Well, hi, Jelly, he beamed, reaching out to pet her as Scar closed the door finally. She doesn't seem to be too upset that I was almost late, he joked. Scar smiled at the other, reaching out to also give Jelly attention. I guess she forgives you for your crimes, but just this once, Scar clarifies. Grin stopped petting her to put his hands together in a prayer of some sorts. He gently bowed to the cat and nodded at her. Thank you, Jelly. She meowed at him, and they both chuckled. Grin rested his arms and reached for his bag on his right shoulder, slipping it off as he walked away to the couch. He spotted Scar's books and papers on the right side and moved to set his papers down on the other side so they could sit right next to each other. Scar watched the way Grian got settled in and couldn't help but feel the slight attraction. It felt so domestic. He stared at the back of his head fondly, wishing the other would always come back to his apartment after school. He'd walk with Grian and bring him home, and they'd grade papers together and talk about work. They'd watch shows during breaks, and maybe at the end of the night they'd end up cuddling on the couch, tangled together comfortably while the TV played in the background before they fell asleep. The thought alone sent Scars back into horrible pain, but the thought of Grian asleep in his arms was something he simply couldn't live without. Are you joining? Grian asked, turning halfway around to look at Scar from behind the couch. Scar perked up and made eye contact, looking at where Grian's jacket was falling off his shoulder to reveal more skin. The brunette wanted to scream. Yeah, just watching Jelly, he lied, looking down at her as she ate some of her food in the bowl. Do you want something to drink? I know how much you like your tea. I could make you some. Oh, would you? I'd like that actually, Grian replied, turning back around to slip his jacket off and throw it over the back of the couch. Scar stared, uncaring of how creepy or weird it may be. He stared at Grian's shoulders, shamelessly feeling guilt for staring and watching the other simply work. He got to work on that tea as punishment, refusing to look back at the other. Do you have a lot of papers to grade yourself? Grian called, not looking up from his work. Scar glanced at the other before getting back to work on the tea. Not as much as you, not as much as you probably. If you'd like some help, I don't mind taking a few papers and an answer key to grade the multiple choice questions. If you want to focus on the written or definition ones, you can do that, since I don't know the answers you'd prefer. Scar walked over Jelly, careful not to step on her as he came to the couch. Grian was sitting with his legs crossed, socks unmatching and hair slightly messy as he graded his fingers through it. Grian looked up, staring at the mug with large eyes. He reached his hand out like a small child wanting a treat. Scar happily gave him the tea before sitting beside the other. Grian grinned as he got said treat, taking a small sip. Lemon, he stated, licking his bottom lip before agreeing with Scar. Anyway, yeah, I like that plan. Would you mind helping me sort through papers and classes? He asked shyly. The papers will be the same, and so will the answers, but the classes have different numbers in the corner. I've got 1 through 4, and I tried keeping them together, he confessed, opening one of the binders. Scott noted how thick it was, mentally preparing himself for the challenge. That's fine. Yep, give them to me, and I'll sort through them all. Once everything is together, we can paperclip them together and get through grading. Sticky notes will help, and so will the clips. Scott grinned, gathering his own supplies to help Grian. They started by dividing the papers in half and getting to work. The papers were laid out on the coffee table by assignment and by class number. Grian must have had over 100 papers at the very least. The entire table was filled, as well as some space on the couch and a few piles on the armchair Scar had off to the side. Grian moved to sit up, leaning in front of Scar with his whole body to place another paper down before moving to sit back down. He sighed, not even aware of how easily flustered he could get Scar. Scar swallowed, glancing at the other side. Scar swallowed, glancing at the other side that were poked out from above his sweatpants. He quickly looked back to the stack in his hand, humming as he turned to look at Grian, seeing the blonde was already in his face. Green was setting a paper on the table, face centimeters from Scar's. Sorry, Green easily got out before leaning back. Struggling to find some of the assignments, he replied easily. Scar nodded, looking at one as he stared. Do you think this is a 1 or a 7? He asked, pointing to the number in the corner of the page. Scar must have done something to upset their god, because Green shifted closer, their knees bumping into each other. He leaned in front of Scar and squinted in confusion. Let me see the name, he replied, leaning further in to bump his shoulder with Scar's bicep. Scar could feel his very soul almost leave his body. Uh, what period do I have her in? He whispered, relaxing against Scar's arm before pulling away entirely. Scar somewhat mourned the loss, wanting him to come back. Thankfully, he wasn't gone for long, just grabbing his tea and pulling a seating chart from his bag. Multiple seating charts, actually. One for each period. Oh, here, he said, leaning back in, his fingers pointing over the chart. 7. He looked up and smiled at Scar, holding his tea mug near his chin. Scar stared blankly, glancing at where Green's lips parted to take a sip. He continued staring while the other pulled the mug down to look up at him. You made the charts, Scar whispered, stretching his arm behind Green on the back of the couch so he could lean forward to inspect the chart further. Green shrunk a little, leaning back to give the other space, only leaning against the other's arm now. Scar turned to glance at Green and smiled, reaching forward to put a hand on the chart. His eyes found themselves on Green's lips again, so close to the edge of the mug. He'd never been so jealous of a cup in his life. Yeah, Green whispered. You had a good idea, he confessed, eyes thinning out as he became relaxed under Scar's gaze. Yeah, Scar mumbled, leaning in a little to stare into the other's eyes, his own eyes flickering between his eyes and his lips. Green's eyes seemed to be doing the same dance, fingers tightening on the mug. I tend to have a lot of those. He was half paying attention to what he was saying, half focusing on the fact he could quite possibly be kissing Green if he just leaned in a little more. Yeah, humor me one, Green whispered, his chin lifting as Scar stared into Green's gentle warm eyes, focusing on every fine detail of the colour. Even after closing, he focused on his eyelashes and the way they felt, gently kissing his cheeks. Scar envied every part of Green that got to touch him when Scar knew he couldn't. Scar easily let his own eyes fall shut, his heart beating rapidly in his chest as he got to close the gap. It wasn't as heavenly as Scar had hoped, hearing Green yelp so close to his face. Scar's cheek was met with blonde hair, and when he opened his eyes, he found the blonde leaning away with a pained expression. Scar noticed the steam coming from a wet spot on the blonde's chest, realizing he'd spilled tea all down his front side while not paying attention. Scar moved away and frowned at the blonde. Oh my gosh, are you alright? Up. Come on, let's get the shirt off and let's get you something that isn't going to burn, Scar insisted, the moment long gone, but still in his mind. Gently grabbed the blonde's elbow and helped him up, leading him to the bathroom down the hall. He turned on the light and let the blonde in. I'll be right back with the shirt, he mentioned, walking further down the hall to his bedroom to simply grab one of his own shirts. He came back and gently knocked on the door before it was pushed open to reveal Green pulling the front of his shirt away from his chest. Yeah, Scar frowned for the other, giving him the shirt. Maybe run some cold water over your chest to relieve some pain. Do you need an ice pack? Scar asked, stepping back into the hall. Green laughed a little, surprisingly taking light of the situation. Thank you, but I think I'll be fine. Just a little too hot, but I don't think I burned myself too badly, he mumbled as he moved to pull the hem of his shirt off. Scar looked away then, not wanting to invade. He quietly went back to his room to see if he had any pants small enough for the blonde to wear, even though they'd all probably be way too big. He could at least offer them to his friend. He grabbed the article of clothing and walked back into the hall. I don't know how aggressive the tea was feeling, but I have some pants in case. Scar trailed off as soon as his eyes met the other's back through the decently wide crack in the door. As soon as Scar had seen the massive, deep scars trailing down Green's back, they were covered by a large shirt drooping down by his hips. The blonde turned to look at the pants before looking up to see Scar had more than likely been watching him. His face didn't go red as Scar had expected, but it did go pale, and a horrified look overtook his face. Scar frowned at this, gently pushing the door open further. The blonde perked his head up and stared at the other with wide, unreadable eyes, even given his uncomfortable and Scared bodily behavior. Hey, Scar whispered, giving the other a soft, gentle smile as he set the clothing on the counter. His voice alone seemed to calm most, if not all, of Brien's fear. He reached out to take a hold of Brien's forearm, slowly trailing it to his elbow to rub. The blonde seemed to understand easily, giving in. He slid both of his arms up and under Scar's to wrap them around his waist. Scar reciprocated, careful to not place his hands over the gashes he'd just seen. He set them gently at Grian's shoulder blades, but didn't bring them any closer in. Hi, the shorter male spoke back, voice muffled from being pressed into Scar's chest. You could feel the way Grian seemed relaxed enough and at ease to rest within his hold. Even if this is what Scar had so selfishly wanted, he wasn't going to put those needs in front of Grian. Scar laughed gently, staring down at the top of Grian's blonde hair. You don't have to say anything. You know I don't mind, Scar whispered, large hands massaging Grian's shoulder blades where they protruded from his back. Grian hummed and moved to pull away slightly. Scar feared he'd done something wrong at first before Grian looked up at Scar. I know. He shrugged. I don't like them. I don't talk about them, and my family is kind of the only ones that know, he admitted. Not even his best friend Mumbo knew. You don't have to tell me about them, Scar immediately said. You don't have to like them, but you don't have to show me or anyone else. But they're not going to stop us from being friends. He tried to reassure the other, smiling. You know me and how clumsy I can be. Look at this. He pulled a hand away to point at his own massive scar across his nose. They both laughed, and Scar lowered his hands to Grian's sides as he talked. A few scars aren't going to change the way I see you. We were friends before I knew, and I'm not going to stop after I saw them. I think that's actually a really shitty thing to do. Grian pulled his hands closer to Scar's chest as the other talked, embracing the way Scar wanted to hold him. I don't mind, the blonde mumbled casually. I mean, you did want to see. It's just not really common for me to show people, and I think that's what's got me so upset, Grian admitted. And you have every right to be upset. I barged in here with these stupid pants you didn't even need and carelessly locked in. If anyone has a right to be upset, it's you for having your privacy invaded, Sky admitted. Grian smiled at this. You're right. I'm. You're right. I'm telling Jelly, and I refuse to show you or anyone. In fact, you're banned from my classroom, the blonde patted, turning in Scar's hands that were still around his waist to face the shower, away from Scar. What? Scar faltered and gasped, his hands lifting for a moment before they snaked around the blonde's waist, pulling him closer. He waited for Grian to react. No, he waited for Grian to react negatively, but only noticed a slight hitch in his breath before facing his head further from the brunette. Scar laughed softly, setting his head on the other shoulder. He gently squeezed his waist where his hands were wrapped around Grian's middle. Arms, arms tightest, arms tightest they could be around the smaller male. Come on, you don't mean that, Scar whispered gently. It seemed to break Grian immediately, caving within seconds. He leaned back to press his body into Scar's, turning his head to look at Scar at the odd angle. I don't, he confessed. I don't, he confessed. But I will tell Jelly, he teased, pulling away from the hold so he could run around Scar. His footsteps quickly picked up when he got into the hall, making his way to the living room. Scar gasped before realizing what the other said. Wait, no, she'll never forgive me, Scar laughed, following as following at a much slower and casual pace. He walked into the living room to spot something he never thought he'd enjoy seeing so much. Grian curled up in the armchair that was adjacent to the couch, cuddling up happily with Jelly in his lap. The blonde was almost laying down with Jelly more on his chest and stomach than anything. Grian looked up and smiled. Grian looked up and smiled at the other, grinning evilly as he rubbed behind her ears. Scar shook his head as he moved to sit on the couch, in Grian's spot from before. He reached for a stack of papers, but was interrupted by Grian coming to stand in front of him, kicking his legs open. Scar was, to say the least, confused at the action before Grian settled himself down between Scar's legs. Grian moved to set his legs over Scar's knee before letting Jelly go, letting her rest on his thighs as Grian pressed his cheek into Scar's chest. Scar allowed the other two, happily. He grabbed the papers again, wrapped an arm around Grian's back to support him. Aren't you just so happy with yourself? Scar whispered, not daring to let the other go. Making my cat betray me. Grian nodded happily, taking the papers to look them over with Scar. He fumbled to reach for the pens, but got them for him and Scar. I kind of am, Grian admitted softly, digging his head further into Scar's chest, much like Jelly would sometimes. It was amazing to Scar how comfortable Grian could get. You got comfortable so quickly, Scar noted, finally, briefly pressing his chest to the blonde's hair. A month ago, you were so antsy to even let me look at you, and now you're curled up happily in my lap like a cat, Scar joked. It was embarrassing how quickly Grian had gotten comfortable. He knows it was a combination of rest and finally preening his wings. His body felt relaxed, and he felt confident and comfortable enough to be with his friends and people, especially Scar, who he never doubted or questioned his trust. It is, but all that rest really put me in a good mood, in a good spot, Green admitted. I've been stressed and tired for years, and haven't been able to catch up with how much work I've been doing. Now that I have time, I guess I want to stay happy, he admitted. Scar gently raised his arm to touch Green's shoulder. Then let's stay happy, he whispered, smiling down at the blonde. I'll do everything in my power to keep you stress-free and happy, he promised. Really? Green asked, not meeting his eyes as he stared at the papers. Thank you. I don't think it's really a job to, but the sentiment is appreciated. I guess I just found myself wanting to figure things out on my own. I've never really had this. So the day I almost lost my sister, he trailed off. Scar noticed how tense the other had become, gently reaching to rub Green's bicep again. He hesitantly reached for the other's neck, squeezing the nape. Green almost melted, letting all the tension bleed out of his body. You don't have to continue if you don't want to, Scar whispered, slipping his hand down Green's back, pressing his hand between the other's shoulder blades. He vaguely remembered Green relaxing when he did the same action the day he almost lost Pearl. Thinking back on it, Scar realized he probably didn't enjoy being hugged for this reason. I know, Green picked up where he left off, focusing on the paper in front of him more than anything else. That's kind of why I want to be more expressive. I only had my siblings growing up. We didn't really have parents, he sighed. Scar leaning. He, what? He sighed out, Scar leaning so much finally. So, I don't have very many friends. I have my family, you, and another friend. I don't open up often, for good reason, but I'd like to try more. It seems to help, but I'm not sure. Grin grumbled, obviously getting frustrated over the situation and conversation. Scar was quick to pick up on his discomfort and slide his hand back up to Grin's neck, squeezing gently. He massaged the spot until he felt Grin relax, sliding his fingers to trace the bumps of the male's spine. Well, if you want someone there, I'm here. I'll always be here. I don't want to leave you stranded and stressed out for years at a time again. They may have been a constant in your life before, but I'm new, and I'm not going to let you suffer. I'm not going to force myself into your life, but I hope I'll give you enough comfort and confidence to open yourself up to me on your own. Scott nodded and looked at Graham to see him relax and pleased with his back being rubbed. Are you falling asleep on me? Green laughed, ducking his head further. No? His voice sounded strained. Scar frowned, setting his papers down beside him. Hey, why are you crying? He whispered, lowering his face to try and look at Green, who only pulled away more. Scar stopped trying to look at his face, but did pull him gently closer, pressing his face into Green's hair. Don't cry, G, he mumbled, getting a small laugh from the other. I'm fine, Grin mumbled, embracing the hold Scar had on him. Oh, no, not what I'm trying to say. I mean, it's just no. I've never had someone so open to these things and reassure me. I tell my sister stuff, and she doesn't really know how to comfort someone. It's not her fault. I've just never been comforted. Scar grasped, Scar gasped a little and pulled away. That simply won't do. Scar deemed it unacceptable before taking a hold of Grin's cheeks in his hand. How could I not comfort you? He asked, peppering small kisses to his forehead and hairline. It got some beautiful laughs out of the other, only wanting Scar to double down and kiss him more. Scar, Grin began softly, but the other didn't stop. Grin smiled widely, selfishly letting the other love on him. Grin would be lying if he said he wasn't enjoying the attention. Scar only hummed in response, raising his hand to look down at the blonde. Grin tilted his head back to look at the other, his bangs falling backwards. Scar wanted to lean in and just kiss his stupid smile. Grin caught onto his plan and raised his pen to lay it on Scar's lips. I need your help in creating papers, he teased, his grin only spreading. Scar sighed through his nose and smiled to himself, pulling away gently. All right, but Scar began, wanting to ask at least for a kiss in reward. He debated before shaking his head, knowing it wasn't his place to ask that of Grin. Never mind. Grin grinned, pushing himself up to sit up, pressing a quick kiss to Scar's cheek. Now help me. Anybody else feel like I missed a chapter? Like, was there a time difference or time skip? What? I zoned out at some point, I think. I don't know. That was fun though. That was cute. But what do you mean they went from being awkward to that and the literal? I don't know. A little bit confused. But that was fun. Also, it's so awkward to read it because, like, the walls are thin. The people can hear me in the house, and it's so awkward reading them, so I always go really softly, so you might actually struggle to hear those parts because I speak really softly because I have shame. Anyway, this was cute. I hope you guys enjoyed this chapter. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.